Hello, America. A predicate acts delivery system method stole the short words of Native Americans A through Z and of colonists A through Z in sustained ways. And they exploited fact-cheaping nature manifest phenomenon associated with that. Such phenomena like criminal insidious nature, and like that we have to discern how they're simultaneously invisible subjects tied to actual things, but how that are simultaneous. And this is in, thank God, of the phenomena of where and how the identity that inventions work or not in relationship to it. They are further positive or negative not in relationship to it. It also has an identity of relationship to itself that reveals means out of nowhere here, or forces them from here. Leith of Hadith, which is for space nature's transfer. So I put nature after the word space. Identity is nature, where value is nature, / nature is value, and the / is also a semi-nature, where those are three complete distinct identities, but they are simultaneously semi-natures, like the cell nucleus, the cell body, and the cell wall. If you look through a microscope, as you do in biology classes, they share those cell walls with that one identity of value / value progression that scientists have needs and needed to have defined as a scientific value in relationship to the short words and our long words, in relationship to positive and negative treatments, in relationship to truth treatments. Know how criminal insidiousness natures, forced low, below, and over what was already an entrenched predicate acts delivery system method that slavery was one part of. Identity thefts and identity frauds are one part of that. So this video is about how to reveal sustained reliefs for black people. But it requires, I believe the phrase is injunctive release. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police force, I'm not a criminal, I'm not a judge. Like, for example, takes on witch trials. They show how everyone has victim, fact-cheaping nature reactions that are blaming and have blamed and are self-valuing having been blamed. The real causes and actors associated with, as they're actually associated with, the worst negative value nature progressions, acts and natures, and the most insidious / overt criminal insidious natures of positive treatment natures, and rolls with the uses of the identities of the grounds and all the names of them and everyone tied to everyone. Per this predicate acts delivery system method that is recorded against correlation nature, against the logic's proper use, against thought's proper use, per their roles, again, with that, for example, the identity thefts and frauds methods. Now, they use life and they use knowledge as words and phrases where they are involved with locations, crimes, everyone, where and how it drew in layers everyone originally instilled to collusion with its sick laws against everyone. Everyone may be forced to blame other things, others themselves, when they have to reaction. The sciences all were abridged. Had the Constitution already been standing, had the republics already been remanifest, which is still remanifest and still tactically, criminally re-engineered state to effectively to have used and to increasingly be able to use remote uses of each branch of the government's identity of the ground locations, of each identity of campuses locations, and for each private database relationship simultaneously. Per roles which keeps manifest, collusion with a predicate acts delivery system method and archetypal criminal enterprise self-value. That needs to pretend other, and to have all those layers pretending other, which already has that's naturally, no one caused it, and they, so we have to have outside of court mandated law followed. And what hasn't been doing that has been hiding lie progressions by framing innocent people and by framing the victim predators that are actual criminals, attaching more things onto it. But in other words, there are people that would be realized as excellent people who they say have no hope. In relationship to how it, on a mass scale, there was this and is this predicate acts delivery system method /S that has all the methods as roles with that, with identity treatments, with fact treatment nature, styles that can't defend that and afford the short words with sequence true, and someone asking to have and needing to have, which is everyone, mandated law followed. But we have identity thefts, frauds, all programs with everything. Originally still forgiveness is not to give up to it. Would forge them, everyone, hundreds of nations at once, don't forget. So if we start, our syntax nature, our fact treatment nature starts using what is actually recorded, the only way to discern it, through how it was is with those things that are shared, distinctly and non-distinctly and simultaneously the same way, by the styles of all these natures of criminal and citizens' natures, realizingly and unrealizingly. It's not by accident that and how they leave out and left out the forced collusion, because they didn't have free speech. The extent of it, forced on our founding parents to ignore how they attributed them in writing with roles with slavery, when that's not what they wanted. And they had to hide their actual motivations and roles for putting up the surface values of the Constitution and juxtapose them with other apparent ones, because they would have been, it was because of that predicate acts delivery system that was entrenched. It was functional. Computers work. Programming is about, has functions as its subjects. As its subject's predicate, sentence, value / value progression, further positive or negative. See, but we have the science of evolution prevented short words, and so increasingly prevented long words, not in collusion with that. Simultaneously self-valuing where all locations, areas, and states had entrenched roles forced where fact treatment nature styles and quality and treatments of identity and convictions of A, B convictions, A therefore B, and 1 or 0, that are criminally foreign influenced, because that's all that was allowed heard. Tactically, that while it knew that everyone would need to pretend other in relationship to the actual course, to the extent of it we are actually capable of discerning. It's, way short of the lead up to it, of the quality of fact achieving nature outside of interbranch locations, while in them simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, on-off private database relationships, inter-campuses relationships further. The sciences are a bridge. For example, no one sees it coming. Everyone's victims, not realizing, shock, awe, employed. Where this is exploited, for example, so in other words, I'm not individual, but this is about where and how we are a value/value progression as syntax nature, where and how we are quality as fact-keeping nature, where and how the debates about jobs and positive and negative and truth, it was engineered to keep all to collusion with natures of logic that recorded increasingly self-value, the short words and the identity thefts. I mean, the identities actual from speaking their words, because identity thefts, frauds, and worse than war crimes roles is originally and still that which is the subject as the identity of volume as value as value as nature/nature as value simultaneously. That is American history per quality of fact-keeping nature. Necessary up front to be able to describe the actually recorded losses and uses of them by that predicate acts delivery system method, where and how our founding parents told us to get the Constitution unabridged, which is essentially what the founding parents of all modern nations told them to do. But everyone didn't realize the proverbial devil, all locations, areas, and states of all modern nations. They were already victims and layers to what they didn't fathom. Was really after premises treatments, criminally foreign influence, self-valued that way. In reactions to other people do the same thing. Because there was a semi-ancient trap. Then there were modern religions that could only semi-counter this. Semi/complete. Increasingly positive or negative in relationship, if you get it right in relationship to the identity that inventions work or not in relationship to it. They are further positive or not in relationship to it. The science of international relations became criminally foreign influenced to maintain, without anyone realizing, those individual nations. That means every individual of them, without anyone realizing the defenses of syntax nature as fact-keeping, as identity nature. Identity is three identities of relationship to itself, which is positive, negative, and its identities, quality of diffusion simultaneously. So criminal insidiousness itself and the narratives of people who lie, pretend other, People pretend people are lying and others pretend to perceive that. Because this is where the short words and the long words, they are only allowed to entertain logic and logic experts that are fabricating audio and video and word with other nations. Specifically, per how if one nation tries to admit it, they get hurt in relationship to what really furthers wars and overtly negative things that we need to counter. See, but any leader who gets to a position of leadership, all locations, areas, and states of hundreds of nations at once were already self-valued styles of logic, styles of identity treatments, value/value progression treatments that are tactically, criminally foreign influenced. Evidences, for example, is where and how George Washington had to come to Wethersfield, Connecticut, a suburb, a classic suburb. Now, see, we have suburbs that are sickly, distinctly victims throughout the whole species identity of volume. So we have to have three ownerships of pantheism for our species identity of volume, and counter ownerships in relationship to the phenomenon, with all that tied to wars, where they are, where and how. We're going to use this method of logic most proper, where we juxtapose subjects, and where what is inseparable from all subjects, what is truth and as all exceptions, as the same truth, and not with the exceptions value denied, like with the A-B logic regarding uses of words like God, for example. All words and values. This is lost science because it was also criminally re-engineered, so there would be victim roles, perpetually incapable of countering where and how all locations have overt criminal enterprises, have interbranch, have private, have intercampuses, have hundreds of nations shared, which seems complicated or extensive. But this ancient republic was a database relationship since before computers. This maintains manifest self-value, what can, as fact should be nature, what can only self-value further and further, means to in uses of all locations to pretend to be legitimate, positive, and in collusion with pretended legitimate negative. We have all the training of everyone that criminally foreign influenced and delusions wrought. For example, that's one of the truths that the evidence of slavery's existence says is true always. That doesn't deny any exceptions. Doesn't value them denied. And that's relevant for uses of them, those exceptions, and exceptions denied, value denied. For example, that lawyers have to speak for ourselves. The lawyers and the interbranch, and again, how they are in collusion with overt criminal enterprises, with private ones, and with that which is abuses of each age of fact should be nature, and needing to pretend other, valuing other having been pretended, and how they got away with it. In defense of that, it manifests criminally for uses of tactically criminally foreign influence premises treatments, positive treatments, identity treatments, time treatments. Time is being used all ways, too fast, too slow, to get over on the short words. And so increasingly to get over on the active and the progressive value of the words we have now, / values, like legislation. like voting, like debate. They have. So they're preventing me the short words to get a response for the counters of the interbranch forging names and switching names and wire crime rolls with what they don't even understand because it takes on. But what they brought this up, this is how I could discern and have you all discern the roles with databases connected on off campuses, identity thefts, on off private database relationships simultaneously, roles with all natures of evil, foreign and domestic, per this method that is through our syntax nature as human fact-keeping nature, relevant again to the pathology of homes. For example, as they were forced to be since before our founders' births, with the plan that they had, everyone had to hide roles with it, because it was a long-term plan. See, they had the syntax nature. They had the human fact-keeping nature, captive, everyone. No one wants slavery. They knew that increasingly we would have to be able to, it would keep the nature of our quality of fact-keeping nature prevented free examination of itself. Prevented means that are actually into science immediately capable of being. And so we have to, many natures of industries we could juxtapose these new, we could lock people into where we have to heal. We have to use mandated law. That's the only way to do it, to get people, because otherwise everyone will lie and pretend to others simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. That's including the branches of government, who themselves didn't understand how they are roles with that predicate acts delivery system method, which is really what most furthers the overt criminal enterprises, in collusion with the fake sides of fact-keeping nature's correlation nature. Think a difference relationship to array treatments, list treatments, identity treatments. Computers can't help but work in relationship to, can't help but have to mimic what is juxtaposed. That is also only increasing, and where the phenomenon of the relevancy of how its identity of relationship to itself is only increasing, and of how the only increasing value of that is simultaneous, and it is tied to our fact-keeping nature that shouldn't have to debate with logic conform to A-B logic with value treatments where, they're leaving out exceptions in exception nature. People are allowed to speak for the industries, investments and things like that. But the nature of the law, if you're actually honest, demonstrably, not supposed to deny exceptions in exception nature. Not supposed to prevent people mandated law. You're not supposed to prevent us from demonstrating that they're pretending passions and emotions because of how other natures of identities of the law and how with the phenomena of other nations and needs to deny such are written right into the law, confessed, recorded. CNN did good reporting with that. Everyone does good things, but we have to discern where we're roles with criminally foreign influenced all identity of the ground locations, areas, and states, and how that maintains what is fluent through our nation, self-valued that, which is to the exploitation of all locations, no matter if they're the ones most hurt and most liberated from it or not. This is where no one was liberated. The identity of the grounds, identity of relationship to itself, can't cause evolution's fruits and gifts. Can't make more species out of nowhere, for example. Can't make that positive value nature progression, the action nature, because we're not using its system anymore. Its system is demonstrating negative value nature progressions, action natures. All exceptions in exception nature are in demonstration of it. This is a method to countering criminal insidious natures that are as victims that don't realize and never fathom, never had a chance to fathom. See, just like it was they're going into a boxing fight, untrained, they're going to fight a great boxer. You know, our branches of government, each one of them, each member of them, they have no experience. So it's not fair. So then they have to do it and keep doing it, and they're going to be getting hurt. And they're going to be mean. And they're going to be right. See, but they're going to defend that. And no one was watching where and how that, and everyone associated with that, which is everyone. Everyone was using positive and negative treatments, identity treatments as told to. As roles, as an identity of negative value nature progression with a predicate acts delivery system method, regardless of who caused the predicate acts delivery system method. Everyone still roles preventing demonstration of it, as it is actually recorded. We have to take this from how they have mistreatments of how George Washington came to Wethersfield, Connecticut, right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. And you had to secure help with the French general by meeting him here. For the phenomenon of means to go to the next step, of means to fathom and to actualize liberation of the human fact, treatment nature, syntax nature enough to have admitted and addressed where and how all identities of the ground locations, areas and states identities are in collusion with and as what can only self-value further and further each person's means to communicate, use correlations actually inherent, active, and progressive means, but by and as that identity of truth that is also true always, not denying exceptions, not denying exception nature. And that is especially relevant, for example, where and how these were sustained natures of predicate acts against the parents of killers in areas where there are still and have been through time murder rates. See, there are roles with what is leading up to that was in collusion with it, while pretending other for a breaching method that knew that we're going to have to do it through those other engineered motivations, natures, needs, roles, with where and how all locations are used by completely fact treatment nature oriented of juxtaposed natures, but of oriented predicate acts. And that was sustained, effectively to have sustained what was capable of being roles with such evils and simultaneously pretending other. Because what is simultaneous is our subject. Before computers are value, as what is more finite than the finite. While computers are being their value as nature / nature as value. And no time treatments, imposition, database relationships, and impositions, and liberation simultaneously for us. But it is also being used to prevent us from this and pretending other. One thing that all these natures of bonded, evil, share with the manifest styles, where it is manifest in their fact treatment nature, in their fact treatment nature, premises treatments, sequence treatments, identity treatments, finite treatments, active, progressive treatments. This is the science of where it is how. Evolution. It is the science that uses the grounds. Identity of relationship to itself, that is native pure. Also evidence of this is who denies it. They recorded half the self-value. Criminally foreign influence takes on positive. Uses of self-value, exceptions in exception nature being and having been denied. So while they are pretending everything's about who has a job and who doesn't have a job, they know on a mass scale, millions of people are in this value nature system /S, where they are all tactically ulterior from the only one that can reveal evolution's fruits and gifts. As evolution's means, as the means of release in a sustained way. Sustained reparations for everyone. We do it right to help the most forsaken is where and how it is easiest to discern the predicate acts, delivery system methods, imprint, recorded remote uses of all identity ground locations, identities, remote uses of their premises treatments, of their sequence treatments, of their finite active and progressive treatments. So through administrations, there are roles with what has and keeps fake sides of correlation nature's trinity, which is inherent, active, and progressive. This is not asking faith. This is using science. There are proofs that Jesus Christ had to leave decipher, and the church had to try to preserve, decipher, where and how all identity ground locations, and the sciences further, were victims, where the responses to being victims were propagated to breaching method roles, breaching screening roles, as slaves propagated, and that maintained self-valued by them because they made contrasts worse. And they did this as intercultural, as a grouping of how we are actually grouped, that is tactically ulterior from how we are grouped. And it has roles with its self-value because they juxtapose the styles of fake positive nature and of criminal and seditious nature in collusion with that which really most furthers the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, and the interbranch, recorded how kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts in a whole bunch of nations, finite, active, progressive lies, and identity thefts and frauds roles. And they need to pretend other. So they need other, not everyone not realizing it. So they keep everyone's self-valuing logic to wherever we have the positions where we can make sophistication. Instead, they make these criminal and seditious natures of sophistication. All exceptions in exception nature are in demonstration of it. So it's where they have them as victims. So that's why, in other words, they're right. We need a national plan to what to do on schools. Everything in relationship to types of experts have to tell us things. See, but we have to tell them too, because in other words, they are recorded. We have to, in other words, we know we can afford, by doing it as a world together, admitting, for example, all kinds of simultaneous natures of release, make everything better than free when we're using the actual identity ground recovery methods, like to be able to afford making depressurized rooms for not, hospitals are a pathology of infrastructure that left out the slavery of our founding parents, which is a subject/S that is inseparable from the sickly distinct slavery of people with pigment, specifically by people with pigment and roles with that. Hundreds of nations roles with what was already used remotely since semi-ancient times. So modern nations were founded where all locations, areas, and states are criminally foreign influenced, enforcing that entertained as arrays of opinions, as styles of criminal and seditious nature, of positive and of negative, and of as identities, and where and how each identity is a quality of diffusion, where and how we are only automatically temporary positive. So, youtube.com/user/Romulus Wall. youtube.com/user/ROMULUSWALL. And my name is Anthony Wall. That's my actual name. And so I'm from Wethersfield, Connecticut. I'm an independent boxing. I haven't been in the ring for years. Every time. Well, that's in relationship to these evidences. There is a vertical and horizontal database. Databases connected. Roles with juxtaposed natures of evil. Worse than organized crime, worse than just war crime roles. For example, that is recorded, capable of being discerned to correlation when you think about what is actually recorded, what our founding parents were really trying to say and want known about where and how and why, sickly distinctly and sickly non-distinctly, in the North and in the South, slavery was entrenched. And the surface identities of nations that we had to use with our short words active and progressive, no, long. Everyone, our species identity of volume had to use. It was in a trap. Because all those locations, areas, and states were already criminally foreign influence. And it was caused, nature was demonstrating negative value, nature progressions, acts, and natures like predicate acts. Criminal insidious natures. Wrongdoers, wrongdoing, not just because the law was writ. Because the law was defend that nature of truth that does not deny exceptions. That did not deny exception nature as itself. That quality of fact keeping nature, that quality of truth uses, of positive uses, and of what is positive and negative, of the identity treatments, that is capable of explaining and having understood to be able to defend the criminal insidious natures as they were propagated to roll self-value. With that collusion with it, making sure it kept the causes of it were blamed on other things other than themselves, and self-value not only having been realized. And that's relevant to where and how no one realized how that would be and is exploited. So we have fabricated transcripts that because of remote uses of each of the parties right through administrations. And inherent to the dream /S of Barack Obama and of Donald Trump and of Martin Luther King and of regular citizen and of President Kennedy. We were supposed to use correlation by what is simultaneously true and individually grouped and together by its own way. Like, for example, what caused slavery? It's also relevant, like, for example, evidences when they make fake sides of correlate, they have collusion with pretending our founders had slaves, but leaving out how they were forced to hide their roles with James Madison's plan /S and all that theater incapable of being the quality of fact-keeping nature to speak for the nature of the law, where the perfect world will only make more of itself here or force itself from here lethal IDs. It's force-based nature transfer. That's science. That's not asking you to believe in hell. That's what's actually demonstrated. See, we have exceptions in exception nature that were set up to be perpetually increasingly self-valued, having been set up, having been proliferated. So we have nations that have the technology to go to space and to make nuclear weapons and to go across the ocean. 1829, they already had the time, they already had the means to lay a transatlantic cable. They already had victim defenses of the Republic that was revealed by the ancients before criminally foreign influenced human relations. As a syntax nature, as an identity treatment nature, as a positive and negative treatment nature, that they can't afford to have short words. Everyone, per a method that is off campus is maintained. Collusion with which keeps our leaders in collusion with the overt criminal enterprises with the private ones and with the hundreds of nations shared policing, shared training of policing. What is manifest as the campus Marcius, the intercampus systems across the world. Look it up online, you're going to get an answer that is true, /s. But with convictions and opinions and delusions attached to it, its definition, its reasoning, that left out and leave out, where and how the ancients most probably, demonstrably revealed English and revealed the republic for which America stands, working together. Not just working together, which could still be negative value nature progressive, with working by its system that causes an identity of relationship to itself that reveals evolution's fruits and gifts, means out of nowhere. And so they leave this out with syntax treatments about alpha and omega, about how they leave out exception nature. It's regarding how it is a letter in the Greek alphabet or whatever. Alphabet. So what is critical is how and why it is part of the word. Alphabet. And so, alphabet is revealed to teach about evolution science, where the top of the Z is that identity of relationship to itself that reveals evolution's fruits and gifts. It means from nowhere here, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. In the bottom of the Z is where its system is not being used. And so it is so temporary / lasting forever nature is forced away from here as negative value nature, as in relationship to its perfect memory, where and how it is making more and more temporary / lasting positive value nature that is also positive unto itself and negative or negative to itself in relationships to Earth's distinct and non-distinct relationship to the rest of space nature, and distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously from how it is also, while being that, its distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to itself, and how this is discernible. You have to follow mandated law, because they've been following people, they've been stacking databases, they've been using investigators, and everyone tied to everyone to invest them incapable of defending what they already spoke with people and pretending they couldn't fathom other than what they already pretended, where and how we have intercampuses, inter-private database relationships, and inter-branch, and a whole bunch of other nations, and overt criminal enterprises in collusion with one worse, a predicate acts delivery system method we could refer to as an archetypal criminal enterprise in relationship to our quest to reveal injunctive reliefs, I believe is the phrase, or to learn how to have mandated law followed properly, and to show them what is actually recorded, where and how they have been used remotely, discerning and not discerning, former director of the FBI down, all gather around, a whole bunch of other nations, the uses of kids and of elderly homes. That needs to pretend other. That needs to self-value money and positions. Where and how jobs and those narratives tied to that. Left and leave out what I mentioned in the beginning. Exceptions in exception nature. Their roles were the methods of extortion, of identity thefts and fraud, of sequence shifts, which are relevant. Their roles preventing free speech while pretending it to be other. Well, that's why we have to examine their uses of isms also, for example. All words like power, might. They don't. Isms. Communism and capitalism are recorded victims in collusion, self-value, with what is hundreds of nations at once. Uses of the identities of syntax nature, of all locations, areas, states, sciences, abridged, self-valued abridged as identity. That can't afford identities used by any individual is going to use truth. That is true. That identity of truth, that is true always, not denying exceptions, not denying exception nature, not valuing that denied, not valuing that being denied, having been denied. In other words, there are countless truths always, things that are true always, not denying any exceptions. That slavery was. That convictions and opinions and defenses of arguments about what's prejudice or what's racism or not, that simultaneously is defending identity treatments and logic treatments that can't defend that and counter what exploits that pretended legitimate by the predicate acts delivery system method that forced it then to have natures of it forced now, self-valued. That's what's actually recorded. So, pantheism and a method to realize leak down, trickle sideways, only feels like games because evolution science. And we need a native form too. And space, the identity of space / existence is bigger than it, is smaller than it. And we could exploit its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of it, by understanding what it wants and needs, which is a quality of diffusion that is using this identity of truth, that it is using the identity of truth that doesn't exploit the perfect world forsaken, the perfect union not valued, having been prevented by already entrenched self-value roles, with all locations, areas, and states, in layers of evil bonded by a predicate acts delivery system method. So layers of evil sharing self-styles the same, needing some of the same things, in other words, to have, and where identities have to be about positive, for health, etc. See, we have negative forced, where they were forcing the exceptions and exception nature employed by a breaching method. That is, for all locations, everyone missed it. It's what caused Native Americans to fight with themselves. to break off into different groups more and more, to be retreat nature, separated from the sophistication of education they were. Before they had that sustained against themselves. Where and how everyone's premises treatments and sequence treatments and identity treatments were being propagated. Because that was being locked into a perpetual breaching screen, breaching weapons, breaching tools, self-value, used remotely, simultaneously need to pretend others. This is a breaching screen method. Breaching, I mean the predicate acts delivery system method. That's what used slavery. And it is worse than criminal incompetence that pretends that it's a legitimate leader, and that is a victim, as is only capable of thinking they're a victim, a leader, proper leader, by pretending to be against racism, while simultaneously not realizing or not letting be realized how that was because no one was allowing the predicate acts delivery system method and roles with that from being to be demonstrated, to be spoken about. And confess. Well, we'll get to confessions, because in the all locations, distinctly and non-distinctly and simultaneously, they confessed. In other words, there was roles with slavery, there were roles with Jim Crow. They confessed things, not prejudice, racism, and as something that could be countered, strong enough to afford reliefs proper, even where and how those reliefs we're on the same page to help millions of people at once, where and how there are no means to afford it unless we realize the value nature system itself as it is actually recorded. Criminally foreign influenced, breaching method employed and having been employed and exploited. Victims, but victim predators. If that's why we have to have mandated law followed outside of courts. We have to have means that they don't follow mandated law. The news media, they attach us to fake recorded audio and video. They have police forms associated with Mendez police families involved with fabricating audio and video on and off the Wethersfield Police Department in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and on and off Fox Connecticut News. They're involved with predicate acts on and off Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, with retired and standing interbranch family members. Dozens of people involved with identity thefts and frauds with them. Falsified police reports. There are crimes of juxtaposed natures with people on the child sex offender registry, including a principal child offender, and themselves with various natures of organized crime. In other words, nothing personal. This is, in other words, years ago there were other resource officers, school resource officers, and they're like judges associated with I forgot it, Delafera family, and a whole bunch of boyfriends of a girl, and of her sisters and brothers and family they exploited. But to make victims counter it by roles with identity thefts, fraud, sequence shifts, uses of identity ground locations, intercities, tied to their roles with relevant fabricated audio and video interbranch and intercampuses with the people on off the campuses, furthering